Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, your favorite Giants podcast. I'm your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike the Cranky Fan, and it's a rare Wednesday morning for this show, and we are recapping the Monday night primetime loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, 26-18. Not a totally horrible game in terms of, right there with the points scored, but just a lackluster mess all over the place from top to bottom. Nothing looked good. This actually looked like two very bad teams.
Yeah, not to be a broken record, Grump, but losers lose, and this is another good example of losers lose. That's all I can say. This is the part of the season, Grump, where I'm starting to get numb, and the A word is starting to creep into my thought process. Not asshole, but apathy.
Apathy.
Yeah, I was in Cleveland for a conference, and I was watching. Admittedly, I missed the first half live, and I got to a hotel bar for the second half after a dinner, and I was with work colleagues who were Giant fans, but so I wasn't 100% locked in, but like 95% locked in, and just seeing the mistakes and the confusion on things, and just. The game was over, and I was like, well, good night, guys. And I just went to bed. I didn't have that pissed off feeling from a loss. And when that starts to happen, that means you're starting to lose me for the season. And I think we're starting to get to that point, unfortunately. So
I can't believe it's taken you this long. I got to be honest.
The only reason I was kind of sort of before the A word is just, again, looking at the division and kind of looking at some of these other teams that, like, there could be some interesting games and some halfway meaningful games moving on. But as we're getting closer and closer to November and then December, the hole we're digging in, combined with the fact that we are, once again, not a very good team, it starts to be like, all right, let's start looking at draft boards. Let's start thinking about, what's our draft position? What are our needs? Things like that. So it's unfortunate. This is a yearly occurrence, but I'm starting to get that way right now.
Still don't understand how you're only starting to get there. I kind of went into this game with like a bit of apathy into it. I had some people telling me that they thought this was a game they were going to win. I did hear that kind of a lot. It was kind of, I don't know. There's this weird sense of hope in the Giants world that they were going to win this game. I don't believe it anymore. Before the game started, I actually tweeted out, I was like, I will believe this team will win a game when I can see it.
Yeah. Well, let's go even further than that. I believe this team will score touchdowns when I see it.
Yeah, really.
Win. I only thought that there's a potential for a win in this game, and I wasn't putting much stock in this, that they play better on the road than they do at home, and Daniel Jones plays better on the road than he does at home. And yeah, I thought if I'm hanging my hat on something, that was it. But I wasn't hanging on very.
I guess you don't think that that's outweighed by the fact that they don't win in prime time.
Well, because usually in prime time they play against much better teams. Like they don't deserve to be in all these prime time teams. They are because they're popular, not because they're good, and they're matched up against teams that are usually good.
Yeah, I don't know.
Pittsburgh right now, I think, kind of falls more into the popular category than the good category. So maybe there was a chance that we could have snuck one away, but losers lose.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. It doesn't matter. The offensive side of the ball, this wasn't nearly as bad as it was last week or 2 weeks ago, even, I would say, where we had absolutely nothing moving on offense. It was not that at all. It wasn't
different kind of bad.
No, yeah. You know what? This game, I think, like the offensive performance especially, is really indicative of what we saw in training camp. Was there is talent on this roster spread about. Like, this isn't 11 bums on offense. That's not the problem.
Nope.
But they are inconsistent as hell, and it looks like a sloppy mess. It just doesn't look good. It didn't look good in training camp. It didn't look good in preseason. It hasn't really looked good all year. We've had flashes of it. We've had moments of it because they are a talented roster. Or there's
they have plenty of talent.
There's plenty of talent on this roster. There is a fundamental failure collectively as an offense to play cohesively or look like a team. They don't look like a team. I guess with the offense, let's start at the top with Daniel Jones. Given the circumstances of this game, this was a DJ game. This was like a normal. I mean, you couldn't really ask for much more. You're never going to get too much more than what you get from DJ in this game. Thought he hung tough in the pocket, but he makes the same mistakes he's always made. There's nothing egregious about this game that stands out versus any other game. No, he didn't do anything extremely well in this game that stands out against any other game, except if you want to isolate to just this year, we did hit on a pair of deep balls this year. 2.5 deep balls this game.
I have it in my notes. I called it a bell curve game for him, where this is right in the middle of the bell curve of what Daniel Jones is. There's sometimes, he's NFC Player of the Week. Sometimes he's the worst thing you ever saw. But this is kind of what the aggregate of what he is. His strengths and his limitations, and the mistakes at the wrong time and things like that. To me, this is kind of, if I need to, when I'm doing my Daniel Jones obituary, hopefully in many years from now, and I say, what was a Daniel Jones experience like? I think it's a game like this.
Yeah, I mean, this was not a horror. He was I think it was the second tweet I put out was Daniel Jones is going to get killed tonight. He was just getting drilled play after play. He hung tough in the pocket for what it's worth, but like I said, he just continues to make the same mistakes, the same clutch kind of plays, mental errors. The explosive plays were there this week in the air and the ground. We had a deep ball to Slayton. We had a fairly deep ball to Slayton that was a catch and run for Moore. Theo Johnson late in the game up the seam. We had some medium stuff to Malik Neighbors that worked. But what I think this offense is... Oh, and on the ground, Tyrone Tracy had a great game. We'll get into more of that in a minute, but I just kind of want to wrap this thought up like generally on the offense here. I think that where we're at with this offense, aside from the stuff we've talked about a million times, like Daniel Jones' limitations and the limitations with depth on the offensive line. I mean, there's only so much that we're going to get out of, left tackles that are coming in off the street or guys that aren't tackles. It's attention to detail. There is just a lack of attention to detail. It's been on display since the offseason, and it feels like this offensive side of the ball lacks a vocal leadership. Like, no one seems to keep anybody else accountable on the offensive side of the ball. I feel like we'll get into defense later, but I do feel like there is a vocal leader in there. I do think people respect and listen to Dexter Lawrence, and I do think he makes his thoughts heard. I think Brian Burns is another one. I think even Bobby Okereke, for whatever he is on the field, I think is probably a vocal leader in the locker room. I think that the defensive side of the ball holds themselves accountable among the players. I don't think that any of that happens on the offensive side of the ball. I think you have some halfway shit with Andrew Thomas and Darius Slayton, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, your quarterback is the one who hires the C, and Daniel Jones right now is hanging on for his job and his, tenure on this team by a thread. So it's hard for him to be a captain. Andrew Thomas, yeah, maybe, but he's also out for the year. So there's the leader is gone. You're arguably right now your two best players are rookies. So it's hard for them to be leaders just because they're rookies. So you really have that combination of, youth, short timers on this team, and your veterans aren't very good right now, the ones who are playing. So it's hard to have leadership that way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like the Daniel Jones getting the captain thing is a bit of a sham. I don't think that he commands that style of leadership. I know you probably have to give your quarterback a captainship. I think especially the contract he has, etc. But like just in general, you probably kind of have to give your quarterback a captainship.
I would bet 25 of the 32 starting quarterbacks.
I know that I'm not criticizing the move. I'm just calling it out for what it is. It is. I think it is a sham. I don't think that Daniel Jones is what you look for in a captain on a team. I just don't. I don't think that you screw up protections and forget to motion guys over. I don't think that you fail to get guys lined up time and time again when you are a leader like that. I just don't think that it happens. There are pockets of games where leaders let that shit slip. It happens from time to time, but it's been consistent. It's been consistent.
Yeah,
You know?
leaders are more, they have that intangible, just they're leaders of men. And it doesn't have to be with words, it's with actions. And
No, I disagree. I disagree. I think that there is some level of action, but somewhere along the line, the someone has to have the voice in the room. And sometimes it doesn't have to be players, but Dable's not really that coach. He's a player's coach, and I know he's screaming and yelling on the sidelines, but that's like emotional reaction. That's not his leadership skills. You know what I mean? Like, it's different than when Tom Brady has his, rare moment of explosion on the sidelines in his really long career. You can tell that's, those guys, the vocal leaders, it's not just on Sundays. It's every single day of the week. It's like, it's holding people accountable for their mistakes and stuff. I just don't get the sense that Daniel Jones is that guy. And I think on a lot of teams, the coach probably fills that role. And I just don't think that there's that dynamic is just not there on the offensive side of the ball.
I think you tune guys out who just aren't very good. And also, players are human beings. Players have phones. They have access to social media. They have access. They watch NFL this morning. They know that Daniel Jones isn't going to be back next year. And when you have dead man walking and you have a short timer, you're just inherently not going to have the same respect and the same interest level of listening to a guy like that. I mean, yeah, they're professionals, but when you're in a season now that we're 2-5 or 2-6 and the season's over and this quarterback's going to be gone next year, fuck him. I think a lot of them probably are thinking.
Yeah, I think that only really works if you get off to a running start, and they didn't.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right. So at this point now, okay, it still seems like for the majority we're still kind of playing for this coaching staff. There's some notable exceptions possibly, which we can talk about, but I don't think it's being helped why they're doing that because of Daniel Jones or any real player on the field. I think it's a lot of just this team is a little more professional than we thought. I think Dable is more of a leader than we think he is, because I give that more credit to the coaching staff right now while they're still giving a shit.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know.
I'm not giving them stars. I'm not giving them, accolades for what they're doing. But I mean, just the alternative is that this team just completely throws in the towel, and they haven't thrown in the towel yet.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, they were quite in this game.
Sure.
This really did look like two really bad teams, like two teams that just in the red zone shot themselves in the foot time and time again. We didn't really get into the, what I'm talking about here with the lack of cohesiveness and the penalties. The penalties were out of control. Illegal men downfield, I can excuse a guy who's been here for 2 weeks screwing that up. But this is the second week in a row that we've had, I think 3 weeks in a row we've had this penalty.
It also seems like it's kind of being called more and more throughout the league too. I wonder if it's more of a point of emphasis as well.
Maybe, but in these, I think in every single instance, I mean, it's not even close. They're like 8 yards downfield. So maybe you're right, but even so, these need to be called. They are. What's really sucks is I think in all three scenarios, that blocker downfield is nowhere near the play, doesn't hit anybody, and calls back like a big moment. I think every single
Andrew Thomas one I think was for sure.
The Andrew Thomas one was nearly a touchdown.
Right. On the opposite side of the field.
Opposite side of the field. I think there was a big gain this game where Chris Hubbard was like 9 yards downfield. And just the illegal shifts, guys not being set, guys not on the line. I mean,
that's mental. That's just keeping your head in the game. And again, there's a difference between not quitting and not having your head in the game, and that's just purely just get your head out of your asses, guys.
Yes, and I'm not going to absolve individual players for not doing their own thing, but it does feel like a well quarterbacked team that just doesn't happen. Like, I feel like on some level the quarterback is looking at his line from left to right, looking at his guys while also scanning the defense, and notices shit like that. And like that level of attention to detail, I feel like when that happens in practice and the quarterback gets on you, then, you know, I don't know. I just feel like when it happens day in, day out, and the quarterback stands up and does it, those guys make good upon themselves to not make the same mistake twice, not make the mistake in the game, etc. And I think that maybe Daniel Jones was never that guy. I don't know. None of us will really know that. We'll find out later when stories come out about him on the practice field and stuff, if they're even true. But
Well,
at the very least, I think you can make the assumption that he's so worried about screwing up on his end that the attention to detail just isn't there as a unit.
yeah, I guess what is that ultimate mix of responsibility between the players themselves, the on-field general making sure things are happening, and the coaching job? You know, coaches are supposed to put players in positions to succeed and get them prepared. You know, if we see these things over and over, and, you know, at some point it's like, what are we doing from Monday to Thursday to get this team ready? I think that's a fair question to ask.
I think it's time to flip this conversation to coaching.
Sure.
Because I think that there's a lot that goes into this, and a lot of it was on the offensive side of the ball. We have an offensive head coach. He calls the plays. This is his team. This is his offense.
It's mostly their players too. I mean, most of this roster has been here, you know, since, you know, this regime took over.
Yeah, just
with the exception of the quarterback. Okay, I get that, but
yeah. I'll start with some of the good first, and then we'll get into where the coaching kind of fell off, because I don't want it's not all negative for me. They stuck with the run in this game. And that might seem like silly, but Dable's just not a run-first guy. But credit, they got it working. Last week, you know, they gave up on it early. They always seem to give up on it early. 20 carries for Tyrone Tracy for 145 yards, a touchdown, which was a 45-yard gain. He was also 2 for 3 for 5 yards in the receiving game. They stuck with him. He got a star from me, by the way, Tyrone Tracy.
Oh, 100% a star. And I want to throw something at you, Grump. I was looking at numbers today. You know, I'm not making this comparison, so don't jump down my throat, you know, between Tyrone Tracy and Saquon Barkley. But for the value, let me throw some numbers at you. Tyrone Tracy's cap hit this year is $866,000. Saquon Barkley's dead cap hit this year is $26 million. For the, you know, for what Tracy's giving us with the offensive line we could afford to get, as opposed to signing Barkley, I don't think the delta is that much of a difference if we kept Barkley and had worse of an offensive line than what Tracy has been doing more and more of with the assets we were able to get with the money savings of not signing Barkley. Does that sound fair?
I think that if you're talking about impact of the game, this game was a layup for Joe Shane. To not compare stats, but just strictly the impact on the game, I think that this game proved that even with explosive plays, not strictly, but specifically at the running back position, this offense still stinks and still struggles to score. And I think that the only way that this, you know, it's not a slam dunk because Tyrone Tracy did get hurt in this game, but, you know, better number. I mean, you're using Saquon Barkley's dead cap number. That's kind of like Fugazi number to like kick money around or whatever. But just $860,000 is what we're paying for Tyrone Tracy this year. Saquon Barkley signed a 3-year, $37 million contract. He's making 3.8 this year, which means if you got rid of Tracy's salary, if you subtract Tracy's salary from Barkley's, you still have $3 million. So out of a $3.8 million contract. So letting that sink in, it's roughly 25% of that contract, and the outcome would not be all that different had he stayed. In fact, you know, as you alluded to, the money saved from not re-signing Barkley allowed this line to get where it is, We are inching towards the territory where a guy like Saquon Barkley makes a huge impact on a game, but we are not there yet.
And not with any real consistency. I mean, Tracy's had a couple of really nice games, but again, last week, first half we ran the ball 4 times.
Right.
So we're not there yet.
The real mic drop moment for Joe Schoen will be if down the line Saquon Barkley has some kind of season-ending injury or long-term injury for Philadelphia. That's the mic drop moment for Schoen in terms of, off-season decision-making. Right?
It's a little butterfly effecty when injuries happen, because would he have gotten injured in different situation, different results than
I guess so, but with the history that Barkley has, it's almost like, you can almost sit your watch to it. I mean, I would agree with you if it were not a major portion of the reason why Schoen did not want him to stay for the high price, right?
Yeah.
He's not just any other running back. He is, and they mention it in the Hard Knocks thing. Like when he's talking to like Frank Gore or whatever on the sideline, he's talking about tread wear in terms of age. He equates it to extra years,
Right.
But to credit Dable, they stuck with Tyrone Tracy. They stuck with the running game this game. And I don't think that they went into this game thinking that they were going to run all over the Steelers. I do not believe that was the initial plan. I think it was somewhat surprising that they were able to run the ball so well. But here's where some of the bad Dable comes in. I do think that the penalties, I'm putting a lot of it on quarterback, but it starts with the head coach. I think players should and need to keep themselves accountable, but this isn't the defense that's got penalties over them. This is the head coach's side of the ball. This is his baby. This is what he's play calling. I frankly think he's probably too distracted to be an effective head coach, the amount he's involved in the offense right now. And they just the penalties are out of control. I don't think that they have their shit together in general. Shit together meaning there are pockets of moments where they are doing things correctly, but the overall, any stretch of time, any stretch of 3 games, the consistent factor is that they don't have their shit together. They look bad.
Yeah, it's not good. I mean, just because they're functioning doesn't mean they're functioning well. I mean, there's points now where they can't even function. So.
I think that brings us to the 2-point conversion, right? Talk to me about it, because we haven't talked about it at all.
Not at all, no. First of all, I just don't understand the logic at all of, well, let me get it now. But the more important thing is this team is so bad in the red zone. I think we're 31st in red zone efficiency in the league, that the chance of success on a play like that is pretty low to begin with. To me, I take the point, give me the point if we somehow get another touchdown later, which is never a given with this team at all. You go to overtime. So to me, it was just a foolish decision, knowing what the probable outcome would have been anyway. And then I don't know what the hell kind of play that was. That's just, if that's a play that they quote unquote practice the most, maybe it's time we reevaluate what we're practicing, because that was ridiculous. And it looked like, seriously, if me and you and 5 of our cousins on our Christmas party got together in the field and said, let's try to run a ridiculous 2-point conversion play, that's the kind of Marx Brothers zaniness that looked like. It was Bush League.
Well, starting with the play design, my assumption is that only one guy needed to be paying attention, and it was Devin Singletary, and he was worried about where he was lined up. I believe the play was designed to be a surprise, so it was supposed to be like and frankly, it didn't look like the Steelers were set, so it did kind of look like if the Giants had their shit together, schematically, it was going to work. But I will, counter that with the simple thing. I mean, like you kind of said it. You're alluding to the same point that I'm at, which is, they say that the analytics say that you should go for the 2-point conversion first. Fine, whatever. But analytics say what to do in particular scenarios, and that makes assumptions about what your team is. You must use your own data on your own team to determine if that logic applies. For instance, the Giants convert 46% of the time. I think it's even less than that in red zone chips. Something like most of the time you don't convert to points. Most of the time, which is what you said, 31st in the league, I guess.
Yeah.
Why do you think that on one try, not limitless tries of, you could get penalties.
It's first and goal,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. No, one try, you're going to get into the end zone. You can't get into the end zone most of the time. All of a sudden, you think, like, what are we doing here? Here's a stat. 100% of the time, I'm disappointed in the results in our red zone trips. How's that? I mean, like, am I the only one that is holding my breath when we're on offense, not when we're on defense?
Sure.
I mean, now we think we can score on one play, and that's where you lose me. And on one side, I want to say, like, this is just, you're misapplying analytics here. Like, you need to take your team into context here when you're going to make these decisions. You have to know what is working, what's not working, and they had chunks of plays, but there is no consistency. If you get one shot, I'll take a consistent 2 yards over flashes of 30-yard gains every time in that scenario.
Agree.
So I just the other thing is, like, do you think at a certain point Dable is coaching to scapegoat Daniel Jones? Like, this is how I coach football. If the quarterback that we have can't do it, then fuck him. Is that sort of like, is this the setup year for DJ in that regard? Because they have no problem calling him out in the media now. He's been benched once. They straight up said that the strip sack at the end of the game was because Daniel Jones forgot to motion. It was said to the media from Brian Dable. There was no hiding who was at fault there. So is there some level of that to this, you think?
No, because I think the case has been made that he's not coming back already.
Okay.
And I think coaches still coach to, above anything else, win. So I don't think he's coaching in a way to put the onus on him to say here's more and more evidence of a decision in the offseason. I think
I mean, I don't think he's handing a fourth grader trigonometry. You know what I mean? I think he's calling the offense like, look, this was the game plan. This is why it makes sense. DJ didn't make the throws. You know what I mean? Like, defensible positions.
Yeah. I feel like, though, in the last couple of weeks, it feels like he's been a little more riverboat gambly in decisions. And that might be, I think that's more in a, we need, what they say, like in baseball, don't make an error. Don't give a team a fourth out because it's more likely they're going to score. I think he's giving himself, like, going for more fourth downs and giving himself more of an opportunity to get, points or go extend drives or things. And I think he's trying to take risks to do that because his offense just isn't good enough in the normal parameters of, take 3 plays to get a first down or whatever. So I think it's more he's taking some more gambles and going against the grain a little bit more, I think, because that's their best chance to, keep the ball, score, than it is anything about, what it says about his quarterback. I mean, if anything, he's doing it in spite of his quarterback.
Yeah. I don't know. Just a thought. I'm really interested in watching the dynamic shift between Jones and Dable going forward as we navigate towards what apparently is a split in the river, right?
Oh, it's happening sooner or later.
Right.
We're done with our bye weeks. We have another bye week after we go to Germany.
After we go to Germany, we have a bye week.
That might be the time when you actually see the final the benching, and because I think you give Drew Lock or you give Tommy DeVito an extra week to prepare with the ones and get ready. It seems like a logical time.
Also allows DJ to possibly go out on a win against Carolina. I mean,
you think so?
Yeah, I mean,
They're bad.
Look, nothing to take for granted. Cleveland won against Baltimore this past week, so I don't know. That was just a thought. This one, the left tackle situation. I don't really know exactly where to place blame here, but I have to think that, like, I just don't know. I'm just gonna say regime, because I don't know how much Dable is involved in this decision. I don't know how much Shane is involved in this decision. I don't know if Dable maybe thinks he's more coach than he's coach, or if Shane is like, look, you're going to have to make do. If you want starters, we're going to have to fall short somewhere else. Where are you choosing? But this has been a colossal failure of backup tackle. Evan Neal came back from injury very, very late. You can't make any assurances on what he's going to be anyway, but you can't make any roster decision assurances given how late he returned to the team. Josh Azudu, they insisted was a tackle, which I never understood. And despite getting an entire spring, summer, and fall at tackle reps, they give up on him after 1 week. And they bring in the guy that they obtained 2 weeks ago. And it was a horrible failure. And I don't know who is supposed to be surprised. Credit to Daniel Jones for at least this. I'd be pissed. I mean, he got his bell rung last night. Again, like, you can't even in good conscience say that they're trying to protect him at this point.
No.
And it was a very predictable failure. This entire situation at tackle.
I mean, is it just? I think this all comes back to Evan Neal, like you said. It's just like, is this guy unplayable still on the right side?
On the right side, I mean, I think that creates. It may be the best situation going forward. It may be that they're trying to get to the bye week before they make this decision, but it's possible that moving Illuminor to left and then getting someone to plug in it right is the best path because Thomas is out for the entire year. But I think it's correct to not want to disrupt. You've had Illuminor on the right side all year. He's very much better at the right side. He's not a great left tackle. He's barely even a great right tackle. He's been very good. You know what I mean? But like, they mention it in the game. It's like he needs chip help too sometimes. And when in this game they had chip help and running back help on the left side the whole time, Illuminor had a bad game because he was alone.
He may not be Andrew Thomas on the right side, but feels like he'd still be better than the guys off the street we're getting on the left side now.
It's possible, but it's also possible that by moving him on such short notice and just to replace him with an absolutely unknown quantity in Evan Neal at this point, because he hasn't really gotten a whole bunch of reps. Remember how late he came back. There's only so many reps to go around in practice. You might just be making two positions worse on the offensive line by moving that.
Yeah.
This is a
So this is a
blame. This is a universally bad game when you have TJ Watt always lining up on the right side. So like the right side's always going to need more help in this game than normal. You know what I mean? Like, you have a defensive player of the year candidate every single year lining up on your right side. But maybe you have to help your left side.
And maybe that's why they kept him on the right side for this week. And maybe they're thinking about making that switch over. And like, they know that Watt's always on the right side. We just keep him there for now. Now we're more open-minded about making that switch over to the left.
It's possible. And I'm sure they're kicking Neal around to see where he is. But I think that is the key point, is that, he came back late. There's just not that many reps to go around. The CBA prohibits it. And remember, he's coming back from injury. It's not like he was good before. So this is a whole new coach. He's got to correct a lot of things in his game anyway. And he's coming back from injury. So there's a lot to unpack in all that shit.
Yeah. I just can't believe that a guy that was so valued and everything now can't even get on the field when we're getting guys off the street at the more important position at left tackle and just go out there and play.
I
agree
with you.
It's really amazing how he's fallen, and quite frankly, I don't know. I can't even see him being on this team next year. Honestly,
it's really tough, right?
Yeah.
I think one last thing that you can hit with coaching, put the blame on coaching. assigned to coaching. Loafing. And this will kind of transition us to defense. Deonte Banks has been called out twice now this year, and then he was benched in this game. I'm giving him a fart. I thought in this game, coverage-wise, he looked pretty good in the portion of the game he was in, but the tackling was piss poor, and he was hurdled at one point in this game.
Yeah.
And then the fact that he got benched, I don't know if it's for hurdling. I don't know if it's for mouthing off. I don't know if it's for being in the wrong position. I have no idea why he was benched. But it can't be anything good. No one gets benched for good reasons. No. So,
and it feels like it was a benching for something happened in this game. This wasn't a carryover from last week. Because if that was the case, he would have sat out the first half and then come back in or something.
Well, Shane Dable said that he addressed it with him. It was addressed and that he would be the starter, and it's clearly not sinking in. And so that's why I think that, I'm going to give Deonte Banks a fart. Ultimately, we're all responsible for ourselves and the way we conduct ourselves. Mm-hmm. But it is a failure of coaching when you have this sort of situation going on. Now, again, I do think that on the defensive side of the ball, the players themselves keep each other more accountable. I think Dexter Lawrence was asked something about it, and he said that they handled it. It's been handled. A player saying that, I think, says something. Brian Burns says this team needs to grow up. I do think that I'm hearing that from the defensive side of the ball. The offensive side of the ball, I just don't hear that.
And why do we hear it from those guys? Because A, they're veterans. B, they're good. They command respect.
Yes.
That's what we don't have on the offensive side. I'm going to limitly disagree with you about the coaching, because it seems like this is an isolated person that this is happening to. This isn't a unit that's doing bad or chronically across the roster. It feels like this is kind of isolated to one guy, a young guy who, and I'm not trying to be his, public defender, but he's had a rough year in what he's been tasked to do. Like, he has gone up against a cavalcade of all-stars and Pro Bowlers who's at every single week. And, he's not been successful this year. And I think, he's still a young guy and he's getting frustrated. And people handle frustration in different ways. And I think he just handles it very poorly. And he's going to have some growing up to do. But I'm a little cautious on blaming the coaches for it, because I don't see it really anywhere else on the roster. So I see your point, but again, if we start seeing other guys kind of giving the olays on a tackle, or not trying to making more business decisions, then I'm going to be like, all right, is this coaching staff starting to lose this locker room? But right now, I think it's more isolated than anything.
That's fair. I will actually rescind to you on that one, but I do want to see if it starts to spread. Because I think last year there was a little bit of this from Adoree. So we'll see.
The conditions are ripe. Like when a big forest fire happens out in California because it's been no rain for a long time. Well, we've had no winds for a long time, and the conditions are ripe that we could start seeing this as a chronic problem. So we're gonna have to monitor this very carefully.
Other stuff on the defensive side of the ball. Overall, mixed bag. They were horrendous against the run in the first half. Just terrible against the run, mostly in the first half. And then in the second half, the secondary was exposed. They found really creative ways to find George Pickens and what's-his-face and isolated matchups that they wanted. And they took advantage. They put them into 50-50 chances, and they took their shots, and they won maybe 90% of the time.
Well, the problem is when you want to discipline somebody who's your, CB1, the problem is you have less talent out there, and they're going to hunt it, and they're going to expose.
It's true, but on top of that, though, some really, really fantastic football on the Steelers' part there. I mean, like, some of those plays were the pass being in the only spot it needed to be, it could be, and a very ridiculous catch multiple times. There was a lot of just good football play too. But I think the point is that when you're looking at this defense and their performance, that's really what it is, right? Like, we know the secondary isn't good. It's not like they got
Right.
They weren't taken to the woodshed in the secondary, but they were exposed. Like their weaknesses were put on display. I don't know what the hell happened in the first half against the running game. This looked like, maybe this is my inexperience as a defensive analyst here, but it looked like a lot of bad linebacker play to me. Looks like Bobby Okereke is overrunning things a lot. And it could just be, the change in roles between Martindale's system and Shane Bowen's system. But I think that it's easy to say that they need a defensive tackle, and it's easy to just point at run stats and be like, see, they need a defensive tackle. And like, it's not wrong. And also, like, there's other elements there, like Dexter Lawrence getting rest. But I think that some of the really bad run game stuff is happening at the linebacker level.
Well, I mean, you could tell, like, every time even Dexter Lawrence gets a blow, bad things happen. So that's a depth issue as much as a starting issue too. But yeah, it's a problem. Again, when you said before, this team has talent. It's just a very thin level of that talent. Once you scrape away that initial level of talent, there's suddenly a lot of no talent being played.
Oh yeah, and I do think that the addition of Armon Watts was a like they didn't fuck around by adding a defensive tackle after last week, and it came through in this game. Again, like, I'm not going to sit here and say the defensive line played really well against the run early in this game, but I think that some of the numbers were really bad because linebackers were way out of place. That being said, Dexter Lawrence had another really dominant game. I'm giving him a star again.
Sure.
I don't know why I should ever stop, but I mean, there were some play. I think he had 3 people try to block him on one play, and he almost got a sack. And I think Burns is the one who cleaned it up.
A guy that's continuously double teamed, in the production he still does is pretty staggering. I mean, if he was on a good team, he could be player of the year, a defensive player of the year, right?
Easily, yes.
Yeah, he's not going to. I mean, the only reason he might even get a shot is because we're on so many of these stupid primetime games where a lot of eyeballs are on him, and they know how well he is. But I think, if this team was a playoff team or something, it would be a no doubter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he still is, but he's among the sack leaders in the league right now, and he's playing it from the defensive tackle position. It's not gone unnoticed around the league.
Oh, for sure.
We're not in like week 3 where he accumulated 4 sacks in one game and then 1 in another game, and you're like, oh,
it's been consistent. It's been consistent all the way through and causing havoc, even if he's not getting to the quarterback.
And I mean, this is year 3 of him getting national recognition as being a very disruptive player. And prior to that, we as Giants fans knew it.
Absolutely.
I also want to shout out Azeez Ojulari. I feel like opinions on him are kind of split. He clearly has issues with injuries. Okay, fine. He has issues with the run game. Okay, fine. 2 sacks in this game. I thought he looked better against the run in this game than he did in the last 2 games. He now has 6 sacks in 5 games. As a reminder, I know it feels like he's been here forever. He's a Dave Gettleman draft pick. This is the last year of his contract. He's still only 24 years old. He is very young. And quite frankly, a pass rush specialist that he could be, if he were on a team that had a rotation of edge rushers, I think that he has value. He has impact around. Yeah, I don't know. I think if this team had Kayvon healthy, I think if you had somebody like Jihad Ward, someone who can kind of move inside on 3rd and long and still provide some pass rush next to Dexter Lawrence, you could have like Kayvon in coverage, Brian Burns on one side, Azeez Ojulari on the other, somebody like Jihad Ward in the middle with Dexter Lawrence, and just rush those 4, have Thibodeau go into coverage, which he does fairly well. On a running back or something like that, and really just NASCAR the shit out of a quarterback. But they don't have that. I think they were hoping that Boogie Basham was going to grow into that Jihad Ward role. And he didn't have the pass rush chops, and quite frankly wasn't really even that good of a run defender to warrant keeping him. But I think that that's really the situation. I mean, like OCU and Yoro had injury issues and was bad against the run, but he's in the Ring of Honor because he could rush the passer.
Remember, the same reasons why we would be hesitant to resign him even for big bucks is probably the same reason why the rest of the league will as well. I mean, I don't know what his market value is going to be. There might be that one team that just overpays for him, but I think his market value is going to be such that I think we can be able to re-sign him and not within the amount of money there will be a tolerable risk with the injury history. That's my and if you put a gun to my head, I think he's going to be back next year and re-signed.
It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know where I fall on where I think he'll go. I think he could go a number of different directions. I see his role on this team. Like, I understand what his role could be on this team, but my biggest thing with him, my honest to God, like, I don't care that he's not good against the run. I think that you can develop situations where he can just rush the passer, even if you just like giving Brian Burns some breathers, and that's some of his reps. My biggest concern is the injuries. I mean, how do you? Yeah. It's so difficult to decide to, forgive the ex after they slapped you around. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna go right back into that situation. Wow. Like, you're gonna get burned again.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
It doesn't. It's not okay. Well, going forward, and usually, there are exceptions, but usually the case is if you are someone who's perpetually getting nicked up for one thing or another as you get older,
who you are. It's not going to get better.
Right. He's not all of a sudden becoming Iron Man all of a sudden. But again, the question is what his market value is. And if it's, I don't think it's going to be as high as someone with his skill set, a healthy guy with his skill set would command for sure. And if, it might be seen with the greater picture of what they want to do with the rest of their roster and how they want to allocate money to it. But again, I'm kind of leaning towards he's going to be back and they're going to take that risk with him.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. If he ends up hitting double-digit sacks by the trade deadline, it really wouldn't shock me if we got phone calls. I'm not saying a trade would happen. I'm not saying that what they offer would be worth it for the Giants. It just wouldn't shock me. You know what I mean?
You're talking about a trade for this year before he even gets to free agency.
I'm saying anything. That's what I'm saying. I really don't know what his pathway is. I could see a scenario where he comes back. I could see a scenario where he makes some money on the open market. I could see one where no one really wants him on the open market. I could see a team that suddenly gets hot, thinks they have a shot, needs some pass rush juice, brings him in for a trade. I don't know.
I know you have said in the past, like, why would we trade a guy like Darius Slayton at the deadline? But I would think if the offers came for him, I would certainly be much more listening to those offers than I would for Slayton, a guy like Slayton.
For Ojulari, you'd listen. Yeah,
I would listen a lot more than I would. That doesn't mean I'm putting the for sale sign out in the parking lot.
They're two guys in the same situation. I think even the same draft class.
Mm-hmm. But I think though the replacement for Slayton is a lot harder to do, I think, than the replacement potentially for Ojulari.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Like, for right now, I don't even know what you do if Slayton can't go. I guess it's Hodgins and Bryce Ford Wheaton.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Yeah. Like, it's pretty slim pickings at that point. Not like it's much better with Thibodeau out right now either. But
and to bring this back full circle, it goes again back to your point of there is talent on this team. This team does not need to fire sale. This team, I think, if the phone calls come and they're strategic and they make sense for us to continue to do what we're doing, I think you listen. But we're not in a position where we have to just gut this roster and just completely start over. So,
last point I think I want to make, special teams. Oof. The punt return for a touchdown. Facts are facts. They got hosed by a no call. That's true. And I would say that officiating this entire game was just out of control bad. Bad calls, stalling, taking forever. Whatever. That being said, I think that touchdown could have been foreshadowed by bad special teams all year and a really, really bad week last week. Um,
Can I ask a question? And
yeah,
I don't know the answer, and this might be a stupid question, but are different officiating teams assigned or get better based on the game itself? Like, for example, are better officiating crews ones who grade out better place in the primetime games or against teams with better matchups of teams, or is it just pretty arbitrary of in the regular season of which officials
I
go
don't know
where?
when they're assigned to primetime games, but all I know is that the better graded crews are elevated to the playoffs.
Oh, that I knew. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because to me, like,
I don't think the primetime things are affected by grades.
okay, because to me, I know every regular season game in theory should be equal, but these primetime games are the marquee events for the NFL. They are, again, like I said earlier, teams that are very popular on just as much as teams that are very good. And to have such poor officiating at times in some of these games, it's a black mark on the game, and it's a downer for people watching. So I know that, again, every regular season game should be equal in weight, but I would love to see, like, if they're going to give the Chiefs so many primetime games, maybe the better officials should be on primetime games as well.
Yeah, I mean that sort of makes sense, right? You're putting your best product. The referees are sort of a part of the product.
Yeah,
As far as I know, that's not a thing, but it should be.
I don't think it is either, but I was wondering. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Special teams has been bad for weeks now, and it's about time they got burned. It's a shame that they got burned on what is legitimately a bad call, but it is what it is, and
Hmm.
they had it coming.
Yep.
That being said, the specialists that they've been able to get scrounged together with Jamie Gillen. Is Jamie Gillen back, by the way, or is that still Matt Hack that punted? I actually don't know.
I think it was Hack still.
But Greg Joseph has been pretty much money. Um, that much has been good. But as a group, the special teams, they've been bad.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know, man. That's kind of it for me. I guess here let's end on this. Where do you land on the ruling for George Pickens' touchdown called away because he didn't get both feet in bounds? He just got his right foot in twice.
The rule is 2 feet, right?
The rule is both feet, which is why
Mm.
it was not a touchdown. I mean,
You
I'm
know,
not saying
I
whether or not it was enforced correctly. How do you feel about that being the rule?
I know, it's that's one of the big differences between college and the NFL is the 1 foot in college and 2 feet in the pros. And I think if it should be 2 feet is hard in these things. To me, if you do a double tap on a foot, you should get credit for two. They equate things like, the shin equals a knee, or the forearm equals a knee or something. So to me, the two right foots equal a right and a left in that spirit of the rule. So I think it should be 2 feet.
Yeah, I agree. I would even say, like, if you wanted to quibble over, double tapping, like, he's falling out of bounds and his toe actually hits twice, like bop bop. But this
Mhm.
was too legitimately, like, he like landed, kind of repositioned, landed a second time, and then fell, and it just didn't use his left foot. It seems very silly. It was almost like he
I
was hopping around in the back of the end zone. It's very, very weird to me that that's not a touchdown.
I feel like, the quality of receivers over the last 15 years or so, and their ability and how they can tort their bodies, it's kind of like grown past what the original rule was. I mean, if you watch old films of, receivers in the 70s and the 80s and, even into the 90s, you don't see nearly the ability that you see now, how they can tort their bodies, how they get 2 feet in. Now it's almost like routine to see plays that 15 years ago, it's like, how the hell did he get 2 feet in? So
The
I think it's a question where sometimes the rules have to keep up with the product on the field itself.
I actually totally agree with that statement. That 2008 Santonio Holmes Super Bowl touchdown catch,
around then. Yeah.
I know it's the moment. I know it's the last play of the game. You know, but as someone who was there and remembers it, that was regarded as an insane catch.
Yeah.
And now I feel like that catch happens weekly in the NFL.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Right.
Um,
And rules are always changing as the game changes. And I think the game has changed in that way where, receivers practice that. I mean, they work on their footwork and they do things that wasn't even thought about 20 years ago. So I think the rules need to keep up with it.
I agree. And we'll have to keep up with this team, unfortunately, going forward. Friday morning. I guess we're recording a Halloween episode, huh?
Big weekend, Grump. It's hate weekend. It's Florida, Georgia, and it's Giants Commanders.
Yeah, that storied rivalry of the.
We gonna do this again?
Yeah, pretty much.
I still
Andrew
hate
Thomas Chase Young Bowl rivalry.
Joe Theismann getting
so we'll keep up with this team, preview the next game, follow the stories as they come through. The last time the Giants played the Commanders, it was actually a very close game.
I feel Commanders, like it feels like two different teams now, doesn't it?
It kind of does. We'll get into the Commanders and what they've been up to since we last played in that next episode Friday morning. iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube. We're gonna have lots of interesting conversations about that. And until then, go Giants.
Go Giants.